Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, Alberta's largest union on the impact of post-secondary cutbacks. But first, from a massive protest over talk of separation to reining in misinformation, Alberta's population hitting the 5 million mark, and the ruffling of feathers over an official bird for Edmonton. Let's kick off the program with our Primetime This Week panel. There they are, joining us this evening. Danielle Paradis, a freelance writer and associate professor of journalism at MacEwan University, and Tyler Dawson, Alberta correspondent for the National Post. Good evening to you both. Well, the spring sitting has now concluded. The fight over a controversial bill is far from finished. First Nations from Treaty 6, 7, and 8 rallying at the legislature Thursday, calling their relationship with the Premier over and rejecting Danielle Smith's claims she respects treaties.
I'm very disappointed that she could say that. At the same time, turn it around and turn it on to the people, the separatists, she calls it. You know what, I think, though, if you want a meaning relationship, that she has to repeal that bill.
A response to the passing of Bill 54, legislation that lowers the threshold for Alberta to vote on separating from Canada.
This piece of legislation was about protecting democracy, delivers fair and open elections, and restores confidence in votes. It's also about giving Albertans more direct say in government.
Meanwhile, the Onion Lake Cree Nation is demanding a response by June 6th to a lawsuit first filed against Alberta's Sovereignty Act in 2022, a challenge that could soon include Bill 54, despite a recent amendment the Justice Minister says will ensure nothing in a referendum under the Act is to deviate from existing treaty rights.
Guess what? They don't honor it. So it doesn't mean nothing to me.
It's just such a fundamental ignorance of the rights of the First Nations people.
Meanwhile, new Leger polling puts support for Alberta independence at 29%, while 67% are opposed. Danielle, what is to be made of how a debate over separation has shifted to treaty rights and how the voice of First Nations is now factoring into this conversation?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't initially a factor. We didn't hear a lot of people considering how treaty played into, the Confederation and Alberta, but now we are, and the Chiefs are really working to make themselves heard. This is a very media-savvy generation of Chiefs, so you can expect that you're going to see that. They know how to make headlines. The people who protest, they know how to make their voices heard. So First Nations voices are not going away here, and there's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be all kinds of press events until they can be satisfied that actually people are listening to them.
Tyler, where do you feel this leaves the Smith government in navigating a road forward that appears destined to include a citizen-led referendum, made easier by the recent change in legislation?
It could give them an escape clause. It could give them a way to say this isn't going to happen. You know, we've analyzed the question here and have determined that this is incompatible with the values that this amendment to the legislation allows for. So I think that's a possibility. I don't necessarily think that's super likely. But certainly they're trying to bring the temperature down for now. And then a lot of the effort that's been put into this at the government level has been to say, well, this isn't our doing. This is those other people. This is the separatists who are pushing for this. We're just here to deal with it when that happens. So I don't know if we have a good indication of where the government's going to go or how this is going to play out just yet.
Danielle, whether it's the response of First Nations or otherwise, how much of a showdown do you see building against the forces driving the separation agenda?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see in Alberta is that most people are not in favor of separating. It's a fringe movement. Although there are people who have expressed interest through a poll, we have to contextualize that poll and understand that people aren't considering getting a new passport, new currencies, trade negotiations with surrounding provinces or countries or whatever it is we end up. It's sort of an abstract idea to express, yes, we're not happy with our current place in Confederation, or that often people who are in favor of separatism are also really pro oil and gas, and they feel strongly that they want to see more of their product go to market. They've been consuming a lot of the sort of headline information and not necessarily those specifics. So I think if you were to actually see that need to be considered and people be educated on that, you're going to see the numbers shift down.
Tyler, you've written in the National Post about the latest Leger numbers. What kind of light does that polling shed on why it is a portion of Alberta's population is so motivated to separate? And what do you feel that those numbers say then about the willingness of some to carry this whole thing forward?
The main thing it suggests, I think, is that we're not seeing a big groundswell of support for this idea. The polling numbers really have not moved that much over the last 6 or so years. They've always kind of hovered around that mid to high 20s sort of mark. So, there was certainly some talk a couple weeks ago that after the election, if the Liberals had won that, there's going to be this, massive outpouring of support for separation. I don't think that has panned out, at least not yet. So I think that's the main takeaway from the polling. Generally speaking, people are not perhaps as mad as the really determined people think they are. Okay, all right. Next up, clarity of information and the impact it can have on decision-making is an issue drawing sudden attention and dissension among members of Calgary City Council. It started with a motion that has been put forward by Councillor Courtney Walcott calling for a third-party review of misinformation and disinformation. Walcott says trust in government is eroding. He wants the city to have a better understanding of what it can do to fight back.
So there's a gap between what people believe versus what they receive and what they report. In particular, some of our biggest projects have been really impacted by misinformation.
Well, the city already spends a ton of money on comms, communications. I don't think we need to spend any more money on it. To find out who is the arbiter, who gets to decide what is information or what is disinformation. I don't agree with it.
The proposal, which will go to council later this month for debate, includes better reporting of misinformation and better media literacy education. Tyler, should this be up to a municipality, to police, or something for voters to decide on when going to the ballot box?
No. I mean, it's certainly one thing for the city to get a grip on the information that's out there and whether or not what the city is saying is being received, and perhaps modify communication strategies or educational programming around media literacy, as was sort of mentioned there. I can't imagine any circumstance in which it would be a good idea for a municipal government or any government, frankly, to decide what's misinformation and what isn't. I mean, that takes us down a pretty ugly rabbit hole on the free speech front, and it's frankly it's the exact same thing that people have been warning about. This is you're well onto the slippery slope if you go ahead with something like this.
Danielle, at the root of this is this about polarization of politics, lack of confidence in the messaging of politicians? What does this focus on misinformation, disinformation speak to for you?
I think that this really shows us the collapse of a local news environment where people feel like they have direct information that they can trust. There is still TV, but often the newspapers or the local radio sources are not there for people in the way that they used to be, and we have an increasingly segmented media environment. So there's very few things that break through broadly to everybody. And in that environment, I think it's certainly wise for City Council to be aware of who is spreading misinformation. But like Tyler said, there is a potential issue when it comes to deciding the sources of truth for people. That said, I think that there's very obviously a need for social media literacy, especially when it comes to how people consume their news on Facebook, in places where they haven't, where they don't necessarily know to check the facts. They used to go to the Calgary Herald, now they go to a local Facebook group, and that's why they're worried about 15-minute cities. So there does need to be some push from cities to tell people how to get good info.
These are changing times, indeed, indeed. Okay, time for us to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, Albertans numbering 5 million strong, and Edmontonians land on a somewhat controversial choice. More from our Friday panel in a moment. Welcome back. According to Statistics Canada, Alberta's population has officially reached the 5 million mark. And while the finance minister says slower growth was projected, it means people are still coming, and that will have implications for the provincial budget.
Well, it takes some time to get tethered to the job market. If you find a job, we find usually 18 months. We still have a big delta between employment growth and the unemployment rate. But you see it in healthcare, education, and social services. So I would expect more pressure.
The latest stats show Alberta leading the way in interprovincial migration. More than 5,000 people moved here in the last 3 months of 2024, and more than 36,000 arrived over the course of last year. That's a few thousand less than 2023. Danielle, what do you make of 5 million as a milestone? What's that say about Alberta?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that amount of growth in such a short period of time and without really seeing infrastructure growing at the same rate. I know in Edmonton, the housing market is now even hotter than it is in Calgary. So you're seeing multiple offers above asking price. You're seeing houses go very quickly, which is good for sellers unless you're looking to buy a new house in the same market. So I think we're going to see some troubles that other places in the rest of the country have seen first.
Tyler, to tick over to 5 million in May, apparently a couple months earlier than the Alberta government anticipated. So what is it that's drawing Canadians from other provinces so quickly? Is it as simple as boiling this down to economics and opportunity?
I think that's a large part of it. I mean, I think, Danielle just mentioned the housing market. I think that's a huge part of it too. I mean, even as hot as Edmonton's housing market is right now, it's still orders of magnitude more approachable than in, say, Toronto or the Greater Toronto Area writ large, or the Greater Vancouver Area writ large. So I think that is a massive component of it. Is people are looking to other places where they can afford some of these things that they think are things that they want in their lives. And Alberta, for better or worse, is the last province in the country with big cities where that sort of thing is possible. People are maybe not moving to Saskatoon or Regina at quite the same rate because it's a different sort of city in general than Edmonton or Calgary. So I think it probably does come right down to sort of lifestyle choices and looking at the budget figures.
And Danielle, where those choices are concerned, how attractive does Alberta remain if talk of separation continues to build and maybe an actual referendum is eventually held?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big question, isn't it? Not only for individuals, but also for larger markets and jobs. So I think that that's likely to put a slight damper on people's enthusiasm for Alberta. And yet, it depends on whether or not you take it seriously. And I think even we're not quite sure what to do with that yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one more topic, and it seems Edmontonians have spoken, landing on their pick for official bird.
As you can see, it is indeed the black-billed magpie. Edmonton's really the magpie capital of the world, so a lot of folks have kind of just thought may as well embrace that.
More than 40,000 votes were cast over a 5-month span with several competing species in the mix, including the blue jay. But it was the magpie that took 40% of the vote, which comes as a surprise to some.
I would not have picked it as anyone's favourite bird.
I was absolutely shocked. All they do around here is create problems. They chase away all the nice birds like the blue jays. I don't really like them at all. I never have and never will.
It's a bird that everybody knows, and while you've got a lot of people who, kind of have some hard feelings towards it, there's quite a number of people who look at the magpie kind of affectionately.
I love the magpie. I think they are mischievous tricksters.
The competition, all part of Edmonton earning bird-friendly certification by Nature Canada. Tyler, this still needs to be officially recognized by City Hall, but is naming the magpie Edmonton's bird anything to crow about?
I can't believe there's so much controversy. I didn't know people had such strong opinions about birds. I mean, if I hadn't been asked to think about it for this, I probably never would have crossed my mind, other than the fact that they wake me up every morning. I'd love to see it come to City Hall because I imagine those public hearings would be a great deal of fun to cover. So yeah, let's do it so I can watch the chaos ensue.
I see a column coming. Okay, Danielle, as an Edmontonian, how fitting a choice is the magpie for you? Which camp do you fall into?
Oh, it's the perfect bird for Edmonton. It's like attractive, crisp aesthetic, but also annoying, loud, resilient. Makes a big mess. It's definitely us.
Yeah, it likes to fight with its neighbors, chase the squirrels.
That's right.
Follow dogs around as they do their stuff, as some have reminded me. It's a little bit of a controversial choice. Okay, we've left ourselves with enough time for a round of winners or losers. Maybe 20 seconds each if you want to pick one or the other. Danielle, you're up first.
Yeah, I'm going to go with losers because I think going further on that Alberta separatism discussion, we're likely to see projects, like we're already seeing the CEO of ADCO come out and say that they want to put projects on hold or they're having trouble finding funders during a time of economic uncertainty, like whether or not they would need to negotiate trade agreements with the surrounding Canadian country. And so Alberta is really facing this struggle right now, and that puts us into the loser category. I hope we can move out of it.
Tyler, you have 20 seconds.
All right, that shouldn't be too hard. And Danielle made it easy for me by not mentioning the Edmonton Oilers. So I'll have to say that that's the winners this week is be the Edmonton Oilers, and everyone who is fans, those who have toughed it out longer than I have, because I gave up around 2006. So lucky you guys.
Well, I'm cheering for the Oilers, so I agree with that one. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both. Hope you have an awesome long weekend.
Thanks,
Michael. You too.